work together to help push those clothes and rotate them around in that drum. As they're going back and forth, they use the clothes themselves to actually work together in an agitation mode to clean your clothes. This is a wash plate, same thing. What is this ring here on the outside, guys? Does anybody know what that ring is there?
It's a door seal.
That is not a door seal.
Diaphragm.
The outer inner basket.
It's a diaphragm on the washer.
No, this is a top load. There'll be a diaphragm on your front load.
Yeah.
This is a top load. What is this ring?
Oh, your inner tub.
What goes on top of that, what's on top of these tubs back here?
A lid?
Did anybody learn about the balancing ring while they're doing washers? Or was that a miss? The balancing ring up there may have beads or water in it. It may have beads and water in it. So when you put your washer in there, that balancing ring is there to counter the hard shakes, the slams against the side and stuff. It's in there to help keep that balance, so you get a better wash and better in your load.
So it coincides with the dampers is what you're saying.
Yep. Okay? So you'll have a balance ring in here along with your, as Kara called them, dampers. A lot of companies call them suspension rods because that is their actual technical name. If you order them, they'll be called suspension rods, although they do have a spring on the bottom to help dampen and to help balance that load and to help keep that drum from shaking out. So, in proper alignment, no agitation, grinding noise when in motion. So if the transmission, the clutch assembly, or something is going out on them, if it's a direct drive, the direct drive is having an issue, that's gonna be some of the things you're going to find on these for a grinding noise. And we'll explain that a little further as we go on. Okay, so some of the special call outs on these issues, maybe a cracked basket, a fell basket bearing, it's off spin and off balance. So on front loads, you can actually see that if it's spinning wrong, you might have an oblong tub inside from something that they put in there that was causing it to bang really bad. It didn't actually get out around. Same thing on these, they can get out around. So you gotta know what you're looking for, and that becomes a tug job, which usually takes about 2 people. So be prepared to look for those, listen for those noises and to look for those agitation issues, because if you only have water in there, no clothes, and it's still doing this problem, or in the front load, it's doing an oval move, you probably got a bent drum, or a bent shaft on that drum.
The top loader is supposed to be a 2-man job.
Top loaders? No, most of them are not. I'm talking about the front load being a 2-man job. Okay? Soap dispenser. Top load soap dispenser. Most of the time you put the soap down in here, but what goes in here? Fabric softener. Okay, I'll keep moving. So you gotta clean those out every once in a while, all right? So you get a clogged soap dispenser, you get a leak on the floor, if the outer tub is cracked, so you gotta watch for those. Okay, so check and see if you have residue in them, if they need to be cleaned out. Make sure you're using the proper amount of soap, the proper type of soap. And don't get a softening effect in your dispenser. And check to see if the detergent the customer is using is the correct detergent, whether it's HE if needed or whatever's supposed to be used in those particular deals. Okay, you got the belt driven up here and the motor down here for it. So on the belt driven, it does not have a transmission on this particular type, but on your top load washers, it will have a transmission, a clutch, and a motor drive assembly. Okay, on these, you got your basket or agitators not moving, overly worn or broken belt, a humming motor, so if the motor is stuck, it's not moving, that may be humming or making a noise or a burning smell, lower RPM, comes in a single assembly, so most of that is all in one assembly. Troubleshooting the motor, you can check for frayed wires, damaged belt, especially like on dryers and stuff, it has a belt tensioner, so check for the root cause. and change what you need to, whether it's gonna be the transmission, the clutch assembly, the belt, the motor, you know, make sure you're getting a good diagnosis. Okay, direct drive motors, again, you have a rotor and a stator. All motors are the same, guys, they all have rotors and stators. The stator is on the inside, it's actually attached to the drum, it does not move, that means stationary. So if you see stator, that means stationary, it does not move. Huh? That should be wearing gloves. That's something you need to be PPE, right? The outer part on this particular one is the rotor. It rotates, it turns. So a good way to remember, stationary to rotation, stator, rotor, okay?
So is that state that's creating energy to help us with the rotation power?
Yes.
Well, it creates energy. State
So-
energy, but we have to make that close.
So you got your power coming in,
Yeah.
and for startup, it goes 1, 6, so it depends on how many it is, like 1, 6, 18, 24. It starts that way, but this happens very, very quickly. And then it'll go 1, 2, 6, 7, and on around. And as it picks up speed, it gets where it needs to go, okay?
Okay, yeah,
So that's how it operates.
yeah.
If it's going to switch from side to side, it's going to go 1, 6, 12, 18, and it's going to go backwards.
Backwards,
For
okay.
the agitation mode, so it's going to flip the power.
That makes sense, why do we need that?
Yeah.
Takes away a lot of.
Yep, so these are very hard to get off, they've got a lot of magnetism. When you take one off, be careful. When you put them back on, make sure you're holding from the outside of it, because that magnet will grab it, it'll suck it in. I've seen a lot of people get their fingers smashed, so be careful. Okay? Basket not rotating, no agitation, no spin, humming noise. You get a humming noise, sometimes these get out of round, or you see the magnet start chipping off. You're gonna need to replace the rotor stator. A lot of times that's due to a bent shaft in the drum. So you need to diagnose it a little bit deeper if that happens. Higher RPM. It's a more efficient motor. Issues during all phases of the motor functions may be showing up, show different problems. Okay, further check may involve amp draw once the motor is energized. Here's your transmission, and then you got your wash plate transmission, or gear case. So this is one with an agitator on it, this bottom one is one with the wash plate on it. Okay, the basket not agitating, of course. Oil leak. You ever see oil on the bottom of the floor underneath the washer, don't assume it's got a leak, but it could. A lot of these have weep holes in them if they overfill them at the manufacturer. First time they put them in operations, it's gonna spit a little bit of that oil out and be on the floor underneath. But if you go in and everything seems to be operating correctly, you check it with Haas, it just may have been overfilled, be watching for that.
You want to show real quick, Johnny, if I may? So I got to make the power back on the camera. Rotor stator starts to move, the maneuver, and as it goes into a cycle. You see it'll go into one direction, start to use those baffles or those vanes, if you will, to rotate the clothing inside the basket. This is all being turned from the backside, right? And again, and Johnny does a really good example, kind of outlining how that lights up, right? But it's, you got positive and negative electrons that are running through there that is repulsing and attracting that magnetic sphere, right? That rotor motor on the stator. So as that's lighting those up, it's moving in those certain speeds. And then when it gets up to a certain, like it gets to, let's say, rinse and spin. Okay, so it's going to empty out the water. Okay, this is just emptying out, draining and rinsing. You'll start to see that rotor start to pick up speed and get pretty darn fast. And these front load washers, that rotor stator motor is going to get up to about 12 to 1300 RPM. whereas the front load, the top loads get up to about 1,000 RPM. So it's just kind of agitating the clothes, throwing them around in the spin basket kind of thing. And then it'll get a lot faster as it starts to go into one direction. It'll really ramp up to get to that maximum RPM and spin to basically throw that water out away from the clothing. You kind of see how this is maneuvering around, kind of jostling a little bit. This also has what he was talking about earlier, like the balancing weights on the top, and then you also have balancing weights on the front load. These have technologies called VRT, vibration reduction technology. So there are sensors in here, and the computer board is smart enough to know at the speeds that it goes how it reduces this thing from like jostling all over the place, right? So really cool technology that Samsung has innovated into the machinery. And I've kind of left the lid off here, and I'll show you, and we can kind of give you an idea of it. But if you take this lid off, outside it seems perfectly fine, but inside, this basket's like kind of going all over the place, right? But it's doing that with a purpose to kind of jostle the clothes, but reduce like you know, where you'll get customers that are like, oh, this is sounding crazy, this is awful. This technology and this reduces that almost to nil, right? You might hear, and that's it. And before you know it, it's gone into a spin. So I don't know if you want to keep it on there, but keep talking about some of the other parts, or you want to switch it back to one, or
Let's switch back to one, and we just ready to go to spin, we'll
okay,
switch back
go
to
ahead. Go ahead and tap one there. And I'll let you know. Keep an eye here.
Okay, so. Let's go a little further into this. Okay, here's one with an agitator.
Can you go right back on that, please?
Go back for a second.
Oh. Well, I ain't taking no pictures.
Okay, so we have our top load over there with an agitator. And then of course we have our wash plates, which we've already talked about a little bit. Both of these, if you look at them very carefully, they both have the balance rings in here. That's what that bigger ring right there is. That's the balance ring. Okay? Now understand some of them, like I said, have beads in them. And some of them have water in them. And some of them have a combination. So you gotta know what your model does and what it is so that you get the right ring. Okay? Okay, you got worn parts, lack of agitation. Okay? So worn parts might be like right here. You see in here where you take this apart. This one doesn't have any auger dogs on it. Okay? But you can still take this cap off and still pull this top piece off. There's no auger dogs in this one, but the other one did have auger dogs when I showed you earlier. So you gotta know what your model is and what you're looking at, okay?
And one thing too, kind of that industry term of the auger dogs, one of the reasons they refer to them as auger dogs is because they look like dog teeth, right? They kind of have this like, almost like a teardrop shape, and then kind of like a canine dog teeth kind of a
Got a little
shape
hook
to
in the
them.
dog tooth at the end. Okay? Y'all take a picture of this, of course, you know, the assembly and the separation of parts. And you gotta know exactly how your agitators work, exactly. Okay, so a lot of times with agitation on your clothes of these, all those things do have the veins and stuff in here. Most of this is done in just that wash plates is all that's moving around to move your clothes around. Again, each one is different. Some of them lock the drum and have to agitate it with the wash plate, and sometimes it's just the wash plate. These are actually to help grab the clothes, pull them to the outside on high spin to release the water for draining.
So will the agitator just pull right off?
Huh?
Will it pull right off?
It's got a nut in the top, and then it just slides right off.
I went last night to a friend's house that lives locally. We tried to take apart his wash machine. It had a grinding sound in the bottom of it. It's got the wash plate, and basically we couldn't get the top off of it at the bottom.
It's got a little cap on it, you gotta pop out, and
Right.
sometimes you gotta use an impact to get that nut out of there.
Right.
And sometimes they will stick, So sometimes you have to have a plastic, like get a long plastic wedge tool that get up under there and try to work it off, because they're kind of hard to get off.
He said he had a professional come out and they couldn't fix it. They said we basically break it off and replace that part. That's the only way to go about doing it.
Sometimes it is, yep. But usually that tells me that there's something leaking in there, because that cap on top has an O-ring in it that's already started leaking, so it may be leaking all the way down into the transmission. Okay? Again, the balance ring. You gotta know what's in your balance ring, make sure you get the right one. That's very critical for making sure these top load washers operate correctly. Okay? You can get cracks in the balance ring and lose all its water. I've seen them crack bad enough that the customer goes, I have all these little blue beads in my washer. I don't know where they came from. My husband said he didn't bring anything home and work that way. Well, balance ring. Start looking at the balance ring, you're probably gonna find a crack at the bottom of it or on the side. Okay? Banging, side to side of the cabinet, if it cracks, you're going to just bang. There's no way to get out of it. Okay? Alignment issues. So if you ever see a tub that's leaning one way or another, guess what?
Balancing ring.
The balancing ring may have all the beads on one side because there's nothing in there to counterbalance right now at the moment. That may not be an issue, but then again, you might want to check what? What would you might want to check if it's leaning to one side? Yeah, your suspension rods and damper assembly. You can check those too. If they're getting weak, I know Samsung's updated all theirs. If you have the old ones with the white tops on them instead of the pink or the blue, they'll want you to change those out. Because they got a stronger spring in there, better damper assembly, which lasts a lot longer. Okay? Special call outs is visually inspection, okay? And rule out other possible water balancing issues or washer balancing issues. Okay? So that's why I say, look, check your shocks or your suspension rods.
A lot of times the machine's not level.
That too.
Sometimes if the machine is not level, that will do it, yes. Okay? So up here, suspension rods for top load washer. This is their actual technical name here, guys. Suspension rods. They are on top of a damper, but they are suspension rods. And these are the dampers you're gonna see on most of your top load washers. I mean your front load washers. Let me get it right. What?
On the dampers up top, if you cannot take off the top of the washer because the hose put in back, you can't remove the top of it. They want you to turn the washer upside down into there.
I've actually seen people do that. But if it was me, I would find a way to go ahead and get that top off, because when you got the lid up, you can actually reach back there, push down, reach back there, get the suspension rod off, let the drum set down, and you can get the top off from the inside.
Even with the little thing turning around backwards?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's what's up.
Yeah, because you can get a pair of channel locks up under there and actually flip that around the right way to get it on.
That's what's up.
Okay? There's a way to do it, man. But you can take those suspension rods off and actually set the tub down. Get up in there with a little pry bar, pry it out a little bit, and then take, you know, you can reach that nut on the bottom and switch it around. You ready to spin?
Yeah. Sound like you wanted to do it, but. We're
All
good.
right, tell me when it's spinning, we'll keep going. Washer vibrates and shakes during cycle, unbalanced spin cycle. Check to see if the suspension rods are broken. I've actually seen some broken. That's a pretty good fix deal.
Here, I do want to show this real quick, Johnny.
You ready?
Yeah.
Comes.
Awesome.
What is
See
it?
how much that's shaking inside there?
Yeah.
Like a stripper.
That was,
No.
you and your people. Not good
So you can
comments.
imagine, to if a customer saw this, they're like, oh my God, what's going on?
Anything that, like,
And what you see there with that shaking, that kind of violent shaking, as those shocks or springs start to deteriorate and go bad, that's when you start to hear the, right, those kind of things, right? So being knowledgeable, hey, this is what actually happens. This is an okay situation because you have the shocks, the springs that are good. They're brand new. They're fine.
Another thing you're gonna find on those two guys, if you see a lot of shaking and you actually start getting the banging on the side, check your concrete blocks. Some of them maybe chipped and broke out and cracked, falling out, and you don't have that balance in there anymore also, okay?
You'll find concrete pieces under the washing machine.
Yes, you will. You'll find concrete under the wash machine. So check those and make sure. Most of these are now, what they call force pressed into plastic cylinders, so it fills them all the way up. And you won't have that problem as much, it'll stay pretty much balanced, but those that are open, like the old ones used to be, find them to be cracked or broken.
Okay, go ahead.
See how it's starting to spin up? Oh, it's still doing its agitation thing. We'll switch back over for a minute. Tell me when it goes into full spin there, Tim.
Yep.
Okay, so if they're broken, they must be replaced. You'll find these down here on the bottom are broken, or sometimes those little plastic retainers will be broken. So you need to make sure that you do good due diligence and look for that stuff. All right, so again, here's your strainer on your drain pump. Make sure that you're doing that. See the little hose coming off that? There are several ways to drain the water out of the washing machine. You can take a shop vac, vacuum it out up in the top. But then you can also put your shop vac over the end of the hose and suck the water out that way too. You gotta put it over the end of the hose, let the vacuum suck the water out as it's draining out. You don't have a mess, put your towel down, make sure you don't have a mess. You can just suck it right out into the hose. Right, fill your shop back up, put the cap back in, open it up, do what you need to do with the strainer. So that's just a way to do it to help, keep from making such a mess. Okay? So you can look at clogs, you can see if socks are getting back in the back. I went to a customer's home one time, the strainer had never been pulled out for a year, and when I opened it up, I couldn't even dig it out with a screwdriver, the stuff was impacted so hard, so don't assume that they know that strainer's there and they can clean it.
Yep.
Okay? You can look for water leaks, you can look for cracks in the housing. I've seen cracks in the housing. I've seen things all the way back in. I've even seen the hoses get brittle, start leaking from the hoses. The ones coming in, the ones going out, even your little drain hose here, I've seen those cracked and dripping, and the customer don't know where the water's coming from.
Where the cap is missing,
Huh?
where the cap at the end of the hose is missing.
Yeah, I've seen the caps in the hose missing because they pulled it off and decided to clean out their strainer and forgot to put it back. And when it goes in the drain, it's shooting water all over their laundry room. Okay, so check your drain pump, make sure you're getting proper voltage. You can also check all this from the board. Right, we're checking things from the board.
I can't
right?
see you.
Yeah.
It ain't showing nothing but the screen.
Yeah, sometimes they don't put this in right. I've seen these cross-threaded.
Cross-threaded, they're hard to take out, but they ain't going all the way.
Yep, they get it in all the way, yep.
Hey, John, you go back to the previous slide for a moment, please? The suspension rod? Thank you, sir.
Usually if you leave something in your pocket, wash it, that's where it's gonna end up.
We'll end up right here.
My wife will leave like the little sewer, the little cards, courtesy cards, and, $150 later, trip charge to find out that somebody cleaned up that little.
I have a rule in my house, whatever I find in the trap, I get to keep.
Whatever I
Some
find in the
days-
dryer, I get to keep.
Yeah, my last personal class.
I've found $20 bills in there.
Cleaned out, several,
Here you go, here you go.
Watch tips.
You ready?
Watch tips.
Yep.
When she goes home. You got money in your
Okay,
pocket.
here we go into the
I
spin
don't tell her
cycle.
anymore.
You find $20. Like,
Here it wind up. See how it starts slow and winds up? Same thing when it starts winding back down. It'll start to hear it wind down.
You'll hear it too, look.
Hey,
Now it's winding down, right? Kind of some of you guys might be able to hear it.
to help you to see that. See how the drain pump line keeps jumping? Every time that goes back into spin, the drain pump comes back on to pull out more water. So you see the line jump, and you can tell it's pumping out water. Once it gets past a certain, you'll also notice that the drum quits shaking as bad.
Hey, look over at the body of the machine, that thing's not moving anything.
Nope.
Yeah, that's what's so great about this technology. That they can have that be so steady and everything's moving so chaotically inside the cavity. It's like super quiet. Your customers are like, I didn't even realize it was on.
Even the frame of the washer was designed to help dampen that sound
Yep.
Man,
and absorb that vibration.
If you look in some of the wall cavities in the washers, you'll see little rubber or little foam pads in there to
Yes.
help dampen that sound.
Those will roll up, they don't stick them in there right, they'll roll up and they'll make a noise and they'll make the washer burn and stuff.
Yeah, that's because they rolled up, yeah.
Hey, Nick.
Like a Tesla.
Okay, we're gonna go back over here to the other side.
Hey, what was that? What was that technology you mentioned earlier?
BRT.
BRT.
even with the closing, it's doing the same thing. Even with heavy loads and everything, it's doing the same.
BR.
Yeah, it tells, right? So it's got all these sensors that tell like the weight, the pressure, that's what that pressure sensor is. And it will react accordingly to that. Its spin and its rotation and all that. Put a brick in here.
Once upon a
Okay,
time,
so has everybody seen this enough now?
they relied mostly on ball bearing rings to do that, and then they shifted away from the ball bearing rings to go to throttling fluid.
Now, they used to have MEM sensors on these for vibration. Most of these washers don't have MEM sensors on them anymore. If you get an older one, they might. They don't have Hall sensors on them anymore either to test for the speed. So a lot of them don't have those anymore. Now, if you get into some of the older models,
That's the
they may
information
still
we
have them,
needed
so you're
yesterday.
aware which one you're looking at, okay?
Yeah, I got another one.
All right, we're gonna switch back over to our presentations.
Looking for a damn speed sensor that wasn't there.
Does everybody have a picture of this one?
Yeah. Open this up, you can't see.
Okay. Drain hoses. Some of these drain hoses do have a check valve in them, so you gotta know which drain hose is right, okay? They come off different ways, so here, this is one you'll see on the back of the top load most of the time. This one on a front load most of the time, this one down here on a top load. You can see that they got clogs, they got cracks, they water leak, they have kinks in the hoses, somebody put it on and kinked it. Now what happens if you put it too far down in the drain? The water may flow in, but what else can happen? It's going to siphon and come back, right? So how far do you put a drain hose in a drain?
6 inches.
6 inches. And how do you make sure that it stays at 6 inches?
Zip tie.
The zip tie. We used to call that RZT. We used to red zip tie to put that in place and tell the customer why it's there. So that don't go in there because you need that air. You need that air brake in there so it'll drain properly. Okay? So, want me to go back? Sorry. You guys got me as fast as I can. Come on. Okay, I have been called the slow-moving white Bronco before, but. Okay, so let's go into the schematics on these really quickly, because we're going to actually be troubleshooting from the board, looking at schematics today, right? All right, so reading the schematic. You can tell me what type of washer this is.
Top.
It's a lid, so it's a top
Yeah,
load.
top load.
The doors are on top loads.
Yeah,
Right, it's the top load. So you got your lid switch, you got your L1 coming in, you got your lid switch. check switch, drive motor, overload on inside the motor, so if it gets too hot, you want to shut down.
We pull that, it's missing a little bit on the bottom.
It's not, it's just basically the one new rule I okay, it's just part of the water, another switch set aside. And just goes back to the neutral over there. Okay? So this is a top load. What is this one?
Lower log switch.
Front load?
Might be one and It is
So
front
this-
load, heating element,
Huh?
heating element, front load.
You know it's gonna be a front load. Different things like that's gonna help you pick out what these are if you don't know, but you should be looking these up by your model number on what? STG, looking through what? Fast track, which is gonna give you a lot of diagnosis points and tips, okay? So this is a front load. What is this? Refrigerator? No.
Looks like it's front load. Front load.
It's a front load, it's got its noise filter in it. What about this one?
That's
This is a washer, right? It's got a washer and dryer on it. Okay? And by the way, this is pretty basic for almost all wash centers. They almost all follow the same type of, and they're usually all the mechanical timers. Okay, and the winner is, well, Kara, I think you're the winner, because you actually talked out about what you saw that made them what they were. Okay, troubleshooting common washing
right, let's-
issues.
Hey, Johnny, if we can kind of move through this pretty quick, we're kind of running out of time for this morning.
So common troubleshooting. Washer won't fill with water.
Switches.
You're gonna check the water valves, you're gonna check the pressure switch, you're gonna check what?
The door
control
lock
board.
switch.
Make sure the water's on.
Make sure the water's on. Okay?
Sometimes some hoses won't let water through.
Water isn't draining from the washer, my clothes are soaked. We've already talked through some of those issues already, about the drain pump, about the strainer, about the socket of the pump, different things like that, right?
Stuck in the drainer.
So here's some troubleshooting resources, go ahead and take a picture of that. Everybody got a picture of it?
Not one iPhone being lifted, all Samsung.
Some of these troubleshooting resources, by the way, are right in the owner's manual. And then the rest of them will be in your tech manual. So everybody got that now?
Yeah.
Okay? And great job, you guys, we made it through washers.
Yay!